Frank stood in chains before the towering throne, his human frame small against the crystalline architecture of the Valerian court. King Thorzen loomed above, his 4 eyes burning with contempt as he raised his staff. "The human has violated our sacred borders," the king's voice boomed through the chamber. "The penalty is death. Take him to the void cells." Frank tried to speak, to explain the accident that brought his damaged ship into their space, but the guards silenced him with a strike. As they dragged him away, he caught sight of someone different, a young Valerian woman with silver markings standing apart from the crowd. While others showed disgust or indifference, her expression held something else entirely. Curiosity. Princess Ava watched the human stumble past, noting how he protected his injured arm despite the guard's roughness, how his eyes still held defiance despite certain death. Something about him seemed wrong for the crime he'd supposedly committed. The Valorians had ruled this sector for 3,000 cycles. Their empire stretched across 40 systems, built on strict honor codes and territorial laws. Aliens who crossed their borders uninvited faced immediate execution, no exceptions, no trials beyond the king's word. Frank's cell was a sphere of energy suspended in darkness. Food appeared twice daily through a dimensional rift. He had 7 days until execution, standard protocol for the condemned. He spent the first day treating his wounds with torn fabric. The crash had broken his navigation system, sending him careening through Valerian space. He tried broadcasting distress signals, explaining the malfunction, but their warships had disabled his communications before he could finish. Meanwhile, in the palace, Ava couldn't shake her unease. She'd witnessed dozens of executions, all justified by law. But something about this human troubled her. His ship's wreckage had been analyzed, she'd accessed the reports her father never knew she read. Ava stood in the records chamber, holographic displays floating around her. The human's ship showed clear signs of catastrophic system failure. His trajectory wasn't aggressive, it was erratic, desperate. The distress signal had been cut short by their weapons, marked as potential deception by the fleet commander. But Ava had studied many species. Deception looked different than this. She pulled up files on humans, a species rarely seen in this sector. They were explorers, scientists, traders. Aggressive only when threatened. Their ships weren't built for war but for long journeys across empty space. "Princess, you should not concern yourself with the condemned," her advisor said, appearing behind her. "I concern myself with justice," she replied coolly. In his cell, Frank exercised to keep warm. The void sphere provided minimal heat, designed to weaken prisoners before execution. He did push-ups, ran in place, counted numbers to keep his mind sharp. He thought of Earth, of the mission he'd never complete, of the data he'd collected that would die with him. Ava made a decision that would change everything. Using her royal clearance, she accessed the observation portal to Frank's cell, a one-way window used to monitor dangerous prisoners. What she saw surprised her. Most condemned prisoners spent their days in despair, rage, or catatonic fear. Frank did none of these things. He'd organized his small space efficiently. He exercised methodically. He'd even created a makeshift calendar on the energy wall using moisture from his breath, tracking time with careful precision. When food arrived, he didn't devour it desperately. He ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each portion. Then he did something extraordinary, he spoke. "Thank you," Frank said to the empty air, to whoever might provide his meals. "I appreciate the consideration with the spice levels today. Yesterday's portion was a bit rough on my system." Ava blinked. He was thanking his executioners. Showing gratitude for small mercies while counting down to death. This wasn't the behavior of a criminal. This was someone with discipline, hope, and strange resilience. Ava requested an audience with her father, a rare thing, as King Thorzen preferred she focus on diplomatic studies rather than judicial matters. "The human's ship malfunctioned," she said carefully. "The evidence supports his claim of accidental border crossing. Thorzen's face hardened. The law is absolute, daughter. Ignorance of borders is no excuse. Accidents are no excuse. If we show weakness, every species will invent accidents to test our defenses. But justice should consider intent. Justice is the law. The king's voice shook the chamber. I have maintained order for 3,000 cycles by never wavering. The human dies in 6 days. This discussion is finished. Ava bowed and retreated, but her mind raced. Her father ruled with strength, yes, but increasingly with rigidity. The empire's honor had become inflexibility. When had justice become indistinguishable from cruelty? That night, she made another decision, one that broke protocol entirely. She would speak to the human herself. The void cell's energy field shimmered, and Frank looked up in surprise as a section became transparent. A Valerian woman appeared, the same one from the throne room. You're the princess, he said, standing slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. I am Ava. I want to understand what happened. Frank explained the cascade failure, the navigation errors, the desperate attempts to broadcast his situation. He spoke calmly, without begging or anger. Ava listened, noting how his story matched the technical data perfectly. Why aren't you afraid? She asked suddenly. Frank smiled, a strange human expression. I am afraid. I just don't see how showing it helps anything. You thank the guards for food. You exercise like you have a future. Why? Because giving up means dying twice, once in spirit, once in body. I prefer to only die once, if it comes to that. He paused. May I ask you something, princess? She nodded. Why are you here? Because something feels wrong about this, Ava admitted. Ava began visiting regularly, always in secret. She told herself it was intellectual curiosity about humans, but truthfully, Frank fascinated her. His perspective challenged everything she knew. On Earth, we have a saying, Frank told her during one visit. Justice delayed is justice denied. But I'd add that justice without wisdom is just revenge with paperwork. My father would call that weakness. Strength and wisdom aren't opposites. The strongest people I've known were also the kindest. He showed her the calendar he'd made. 5 days left. Want to know how I'm spending them? How? Learning about your people. Understanding Valerian culture. If I'm dying for crossing your borders, I want to at least know what I died respecting. Ava felt something crack inside her. Here was a man sentenced unjustly, using his final days not for hatred but for understanding. It was the most profoundly dignified thing she'd ever witnessed. Tell me about Earth, she requested. So Frank did. Frank painted pictures with words. He described Earth's blue oceans, forests that stretched beyond sight, cities of glass and steel where billions lived in controlled chaos. He spoke of humanity's journey to the stars, driven not by conquest but by an aching need to know what lay beyond the next horizon. We're not the strongest species, he admitted. Not the smartest or longest lived. But we're stubborn. We endure. We adapt. And we never, ever stop asking questions. Ava absorbed every word. Your people sound reckless. Maybe. But we call it brave. Frank's expression grew distant. I volunteered for solo exploration because someone has to be first. Has to take the risks so others can follow safely. I knew the dangers. Did you know you might be executed for an accident? No, he said quietly. That particular scenario wasn't in the training manual. Ava laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in memory. The sound startled them both. You make jokes facing death, she observed. Humor is how humans cope with darkness. It's light we carry inside ourselves when everything outside goes dark. King Thorzen noticed his daughter's distraction. Hala's security reported her unusual activities, accessing prisoner observation systems, spending hours in isolated meditation chambers where she actually spoke to the void cell. He confronted her directly. "You've been speaking with the human." Ava didn't deny it. "Yes. Why would you disgrace yourself with such contact?" "I wanted to understand him. Father, he's not a criminal. He's an explorer who suffered equipment failure. Executing him violates the very honor you claim to protect." Thorzen's eyes blazed. "You question my judgment? Before the court, I declared his sentence. To reverse it now would show weakness, invite chaos. The human dies tomorrow, and you will attend the execution to learn what strength truly means." Ava's heart sank. Tomorrow. She'd run out of time. That night, she visited Frank's cell one final time, her composure cracking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried." Frank approached the transparent barrier. "You saw me. You listened. You cared. That's not nothing, Ava. That's everything." "I don't want you to die," Ava said, tears streaming down her face, a profound display of emotion for stoic Valorians. "I know. But here's the thing about humans, we don't measure life by its length. We measure it by its meaning." Frank placed his palm against the barrier. "These conversations with you. They meant something. You helped me spend my final days learning instead of hating. That's a gift. How can you comfort me when you're the one dying? Because maybe I'm not dying for nothing. Maybe I'm planting a seed. You see things differently now, right? Question things you didn't question before." Ava nodded. "Then I changed something in this empire. Through you, I matter. The ripples keep going long after the stone hits the water." Ava made a decision. "What if there was another way?" "What do you mean?" "Valerian law is absolute, but it has one exception, the trial of truth. An ancient right where the accused can prove their worth through challenge. No one's invoked it in centuries because it's brutal, usually fatal anyway." Frank straightened. "Tell me everything." Ava explained rapidly. The trial of truth allowed condemned prisoners to undergo 3 tests proving their character. Physical endurance, mental clarity, and spiritual worth. Survival meant the sentence was commuted, the gods themselves had spoken through the trial's outcome. The tests nearly always kill the participant, Ava warned. They're designed for Valorians, who are stronger than humans. But it's a chance. A terrible one. Frank smiled. Still a chance. How do I invoke it? At the execution, before the death strike, speak the words, "I claim the trial of truth beneath the ancient law. My father cannot refuse without breaking sacred tradition." "But Frank, the physical test alone might kill you. Your species isn't built like ours." "You'd be surprised what humans are built for," Frank said. "We might not be the strongest or fastest, but we've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own worst impulses. We're survivors, Ava. Let me show you." Ava transmitted the trial's details to his cell computer. Frank had hours to prepare for something designed to kill him. He got to work. Frank studied the trial requirements obsessively. The physical test, carry a heavy stone up a mountain path without rest. The mental test, solve a paradox of ancient Valerian philosophy within a time limit. The spiritual test, face your greatest fear made manifest through psychic technology. He exercised through the night, knowing it wouldn't make much difference but unable to sit still. He reviewed everything Ava had taught him about Valerian thinking, their values, their logical frameworks. For the spiritual test, he meditated on his fears. Humans were good at facing fear, they'd built entire psychological systems around it. As dawn approached, Ava visited one last time. "You should rest," she urged. "Can't. But sit with me. Tell me about the mountain where the trial happens. She described the sacred peak, the ancient steps carved by the first Valorians, the weight of history pressing down on that stone path. Frank listened, visualizing every detail, preparing mentally for what his body would endure. Why are you really doing this? Ava asked softly. Because giving up isn't in my nature. Because you gave me a chance. And because maybe, just maybe, I can show your people something they've forgotten. What's that? That strength without mercy is just brutality wearing a crown. Frank was brought before the assembled court in chains. Thousands of Valorians watched from towering stands. King Thorzen sat on his throne, staff in hand, ready to pronounce the final words. The human stands condemned for border violation, the king declared. Let justice be served. The executioner approached, energy blade humming. Wait. Frank's voice rang out clearly. I claim the trial of truth beneath the ancient law. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Thorzen's face twisted in rage, but the sacred words had been spoken. Ancient law superseded even royal decree. You dare invoke the trial? Thorzen growled. I do. I claim my right as one condemned to prove my worth before the gods themselves. The king couldn't refuse without shattering the very traditions that legitimized his rule. His eyes found Ava in the crowd, understanding immediately who had informed the human. So be it, he said coldly. Prepare the 3 tests. Let the gods judge this human. And when he fails and dies in agony, let it be remembered that he chose this suffering. Frank met Ava's eyes across the crowd. She nodded once, encouragingly. The trial would begin immediately. They transported Frank to the sacred mountain. The stone weighed 60 kilograms, standard for Valorians, who were naturally stronger than humans. The path stretched 2 kilometers upward, steep and treacherous. You may not rest, sit, or put down the stone until you reach the summit, the trial master explained. Failure means death. Frank lifted the stone. His muscles screamed immediately. It was heavier than anything he'd trained for, but he'd anticipated that. He started climbing. The first 100 meters were manageable. The second 100, his arms began shaking. By 300 meters, pain consumed his awareness. Valorians watching from observation platforms whispered that the human would fail soon. But Frank had something they didn't understand. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, they didn't sprint down prey, they walked it to exhaustion over days. Endurance was written into human DNA. He focused on breathing. Step, breathe. Step, breathe. He ignored the pain, acknowledged it and moved through it. His vision narrowed to the next step, then the next. Time disappeared. There was only the stone, the path, and the stubborn human refusal to quit. Frank's legs were numb. Blood seeped from his shoulders where the stone had torn skin. His heart hammered dangerously fast. But the summit was close, 50 meters, 40, 30. The Valorian observers fell silent. The human was actually going to make it. 20 meters. 10. Frank's leg buckled. He crashed to one knee, the stone nearly rolling from his grip. The crowd murmured, if the stone touched the ground, he failed. But Frank held on. Shaking, bleeding, he forced himself upright. 5 meters. With a final surge of determination, he staggered onto the summit platform and set the stone down carefully. He'd passed the first test. Ava, watching through remote screens in the palace, wept with relief. King Thorzen's face was stone. He survived one test. The mental test will break him. Humans are not philosophers. But Thorzen didn't know Frank. Didn't know that humans had produced countless philosophers, thinkers who'd wrestled with existence's greatest paradoxes. After a brief rest, allowed between tests, they brought Frank to the chamber of thought. The second trial was beginning. The trial master presented the ancient paradox: a warrior's strength comes from tradition, yet tradition declares that true strength requires questioning tradition. How can one honor tradition while questioning it, and how can one question it while honoring it? Resolve this paradox. Frank sat in the meditation chamber, weakness still overwhelming his body, but his mind engaged with the problem. He had 1 hour. Valorians resolved this paradox through elaborate logical frameworks, often taking multiple attempts. But Frank approached it differently. 30 minutes in, he signaled completion. Tradition isn't a cage, Frank said. It's a foundation. You honor tradition by understanding why it exists, what problem it solved, what wisdom it contains. Questioning tradition means testing whether that wisdom still serves its purpose. You honor the past by ensuring its gifts remain relevant to the future. The paradox only exists if you treat tradition as static. But real tradition is living, it breathes, adapts, grows. Like a tree, the roots are ancient, but new leaves grow every season. Silence filled the chamber. The trial master's eyes widened. The human has passed the mental test. The final test was the most dangerous. Psychic technology would manifest Frank's deepest fear, making it vivid and real to his senses. Many Valorians died of heart failure during this test, their minds unable to distinguish the illusion from reality. They placed Frank in the psychic chamber. Ava wanted to stop it, knowing this test killed even prepared Valorians, but her father's guards prevented her from interfering. Begin, the king commanded. The machine activated. Frank's vision blurred, then refocused. He stood on Earth, but something was wrong. Cities burned. Ships fell from the sky. And it was his fault, his mission had led hostile aliens back to humanity's homeworld. Everyone he'd ever known was dying because of him. The fear was overwhelming. His heart rate spiked dangerously. But then Frank did something unexpected. He laughed. "Nice try," he said to the illusion. "But I know my fear, and I've already faced it." The illusion wavered, confused. The machine was designed for victims who fought the fear, not ones who accepted it. "My fear is failure," Frank continued. "Dying without meaning. But I've already found meaning, in these trials, in what I've taught Ava. I've already won. So this?" He gestured at the burning world. "This is just a bad dream. And humans wake up from nightmares." The psychic chamber powered down. Frank remained standing, conscious, alive. Medical scanners confirmed his vitals, elevated but stable. He'd passed all 3 tests. The assembled Valorians erupted in shocked murmuring. In 3,000 cycles, only a handful of individuals had survived the trial of truth. None had been alien. None had been physically weaker than Valorian standard. Yet this human had endured. King Thorzen stood slowly, face unreadable. "The trial is complete. The gods have spoken." By law, Frank's sentence was commuted. But the king's next words would determine everything. "The human has proven himself worthy of life," Thorzen acknowledged. "However, he has also proven himself dangerous. A being of such determination, such unusual thinking, cannot be allowed to leave and potentially threaten our empire. Therefore, I declare a new sentence, permanent imprisonment, comfortable but confined, for the remainder of his natural life." "No." Ava's voice rang out. She stepped forward from the crowd, breaking every protocol. "Father, you violate the spirit of the law. The trial grants freedom, not a different cage." "Silence, daughter. I have spoken." But Ava didn't silence. Something had broken in her, or perhaps been freed. "You asked me to witness this execution to learn about strength," she said, her voice carrying across the assembly. "I have learned. But not the lesson you intended." She turned to address the entire court. "I've watched this human face certain death with dignity. I've heard him speak of his people's values, exploration, endurance, hope. I've seen him survive trials that would kill most Valorians, not through superior strength but through superior will. And now I watch my father, who claims to embody honor, twist the law to satisfy his pride. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one spoke to the king this way. Father, you taught me that power without honor is tyranny. What honor is there in imprisoning a man who has proven his innocence? What strength in fearing a single human's ideas? Thorzen's face flushed with rage. You forget yourself, Ava. No, father. I've finally found myself. She walked to stand beside Frank. This human showed me that true strength is questioning when necessary, adapting when wise, and showing mercy when justice demands it. If you imprison him, you prove that our empire's honor is dead. The court fell silent. Ava had committed an act of open defiance. By Valerian law, the king could punish her severely. But Thorzen saw something in that moment, something that terrified him. The court's eyes were on his daughter with admiration. Younger Valorians nodded in agreement with her words. The absolute certainty that had maintained his rule for 3,000 cycles was cracking. You would defy your king? He asked quietly. I would serve my people, Ava replied. Including you, father, by preventing you from making a mistake that history would judge harshly. Frank, despite his exhaustion, stepped forward. Your Majesty, I don't want to be a source of conflict. I passed your trial because I refuse to give up, but I harbor no ill will toward your people. Release me, and I'll return to human space. I'll report that I accidentally violated your borders and was treated firmly but justly. Or imprison me, and create a diplomatic incident when my people come searching. The choice is yours. Thorzen studied the human. Damaged, exhausted, barely able to stand, yet still negotiating from a position of dignity. You would speak truthfully of us. After we nearly executed you. I speak truth or I speak nothing. It's a human thing. King Thorzen sat back on his throne, aging suddenly visible in his features. He looked at his daughter, truly looked, and saw not the child he'd commanded but the leader she'd become. The human has completed the trial of truth, he said finally. By ancient law, his sentence is commuted and he is granted freedom. Relief flooded through Ava. But, the king continued, he will not leave immediately. He will remain as our guest for one cycle, to teach us about his people so that future accidents might be prevented. We will repair his ship and provision it properly. And he will carry our formal diplomatic proposal to the human governments, a proposal for mutual recognition and navigation protocols. He looked directly at Frank. You are the first human to show us that strength takes many forms. Perhaps it is time the Valerian Empire learned from other species instead of merely judging them. Frank bowed, the gesture filled with genuine respect despite his pain. I accept, Your Majesty. Thank you. Thorzen's gaze shifted to his daughter. And you, Ava, will serve as ambassador to this arrangement. You clearly understand the human better than anyone. Ava bowed, hiding her smile. The following days were transformative. Frank recovered in the palace medical facilities, Valerian technology healing his injuries rapidly. Ava visited daily, no longer in secret but as official ambassador. You took a terrible risk speaking out, Frank told her. I learned from a stubborn human that some risks are worth taking. They talked for hours, now openly discussing culture, philosophy, science. Other Valorians began joining, younger ones, curious about the human who'd survived the impossible. Frank taught them about Earth's diversity, about humanity's struggles and triumphs, about the power of hope and adaptation. In return, he learned Valerian history, understanding how an empire built on strength had slowly confused power with justice. Your father is changing, Frank observed one day. Slowly, but it's happening. You changed him, Ava said. By being yourself. By refusing to be what he expected. No, Frank corrected gently. You changed him. I just gave you the courage to speak up. That's all anyone can do, plant seeds and hope they grow. The cycle passed quickly, filled with learning, growing understanding, and the beginning of true friendship between species. Frank's ship was repaired, upgraded even, with Valerian navigation systems that would prevent future border incidents. Diplomatic documents were prepared, proposing formal relations between the Valerian Empire and human governments. King Thorzen personally oversaw the preparations. His relationship with his daughter had shifted, less commanding, more consulting. The court had noticed and approved. Some traditions were strengthening through their evolution. On the final day, Thorzen requested a private meeting with Frank. I nearly killed an innocent being, the king said bluntly. Because I valued consistency over truth. You were protecting your people the only way you knew, Frank replied. That's not evil. It's just incomplete. My daughter sees clearer than I do. Perhaps she is ready to lead. Perhaps you both are, together. Leadership doesn't have to be solitary. Thorzen studied the human. Your people are fortunate to have explorers like you. Brave enough to face the unknown, wise enough to find peace instead of conflict. We're all just doing our best, Frank said. Humans, Valorians, everyone out there among the stars. Maybe that's enough, to keep trying, keep learning, keep reaching out. They clasped hands, human and Valerian, in a gesture of mutual respect. The farewell ceremony was public, a stark contrast to the execution that almost was. Thousands of Valorians gathered, many who'd followed Frank's trial and come to respect the human's resilience. Ava accompanied Frank to his ship. They stood at the boarding ramp, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Will you come back? She asked. If your people will have me. I'm officially a human ambassador now, thanks to you. I suspect I'll be making this trip regularly. Good. I have much more to learn. So do I, Frank smiled. You know what the best part of all this is? I came here by accident, nearly died, and somehow started something that might change both our civilizations. Life's funny that way. Humans have a strange definition of funny. Yeah, we do. He offered his hand. She took it. Thank you, Ava. For seeing what no one else could see. For being brave enough to speak truth to power. For being my friend. Thank you for showing me that strength and compassion aren't opposites. That questioning and loyalty can coexist. That one person, refusing to give up, can change everything. They embraced, human and alien, two individuals who'd bridged an impossible gap. Frank's ship lifted smoothly, Valerian technology humming efficiently. He set course for human space, carrying diplomatic proposals that would reshape the sector's political landscape. Behind him, Ava stood with her father, watching the ship disappear into the stars. He will return, Thorzen said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And when he does, we'll be better hosts. Better listeners. Better partners. The king nodded. The empire is changing, daughter. Thanks to you. Thanks to Frank. Thanks to both of us. Thanks to everyone willing to question when necessary and grow when possible. Across the vast distance, Frank smiled as his ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. He'd set out as a solo explorer and was returning as a bridge between civilizations. The data he'd collected had become something far more valuable: understanding, friendship, hope. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, misunderstandings, potential conflicts. But it was also full of beings capable of change, of learning, of choosing compassion over cruelty. The alien king had sentenced him to death, but his daughter saw what no one else could, not just Frank's humanity, but her own people's capacity to evolve. And that made all the difference. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, full of infinite possibility.